sharing my. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir, it is there.
Okay. So in the last session, we saw how we can create a graph. Now let us focus our attention on the application part. Assuming we have created a graph or we have a graph available to us, then what are the fundamental operations that needs to be performed on the graph? So I think in many other parallel sessions in the program, you'll have lectures about uh, reasoning, inference, Sparkle-based querying of the graph. So I decided not to cover that material, but instead, what I did is I focused on three specific capabilities, three APIs we developed as part of IBM Watson, where you would see the use of knowledge graphs in a non-traditional and a more applied sense. Uh, so we were not using your typical inferencing or Sparkle engines. It's just that we had this graph available to us, and it was more how do we know more about the entities that the person is interested in. And these applications were actually motivated by our discussions that we had with the federal client, the security agencies of the US government. So I'll talk more about those things, and I think Sparkle, inferencing, reasoning, those issues will be covered by other speakers in the program. So let's start. So, so from the user's point of view, right, when the main fundamental capabilities that a graph should offer is, first of all, the user should be able to, easily find the entities that they are interested in, right? So let's say if you are a scientist in medicine, you should be able to figure out, okay, is there a drug or a medicine or a chemical I am interested in? Is it present in the graph? Or if I'm a security agency and I'm looking for certain terrorists or criminals, I want to know more about them in the graph, right? So for first of all, I need to find whether they exist in the graph or not. So that's the first fundamental capability, finding the right entities. And once you have found the right entities, okay, so I found what I'm looking for. Now, starting from this entity, let me see what else is there in the graph about this entity. So that we called as exploring the graph, uh, allowing uh, allowing the users to explore the graph in a controlled fashion helps them know more about the entities and also how the entity they are interested in, how that entity is interacting with other entities in the graph. That's also very useful, as you'll see in the application later. So let's start with the first step itself, finding the right entity, right? It's the most fundamental primitive operation. Unless you know which entity to look for in the graph, you'll not be able to do anything with the graph, right? So to motivate the problem, let me uh, present to you this question. So do you know how many people named Steve exist in Wikipedia? So last I checked, there were more than 16,000 people in Wikipedia that have Steve in their name, right? So there will be Steve Jobs, Steve Austin, Steve Martin, Steve Lowy, Steve Aqua, all these people that have Steve in their name. And there are at least 258 persons called Steve that are actually mentioned in more than 50 documents in Wikipedia. So they are fairly popular entities, right? So now if someone says, let's say, uh, I want to know more about Steve. How do you know which Steve this person is interested in? And you may say that, a person can specify, but that, I want to know this exact Steve Jobs or Steve Austin. But what happens is that, especially for security agencies, they never get the exact complete name, right? They'll always get some incomplete or partial information, right? So given that partial information, how do you figure out who's the exact person they are looking for? So that was the problem. So, and so a lot of examples I'll show, they are motivated from the security agency use case, but the data that I'll be using is Wikipedia for obvious reasons because we were not allowed access to those intelligence reports. Uh, okay, so here's the problem. You have a partial name of a person of an organization, and you want to figure out which is the exact person or entity the user is looking for, right? So now here you may think, okay, how do we go about solving the problem, right? So the first step always should be think how do you solve the problem as a person, as a human being, and then after that, once you have figured that out, then let's think about, okay, so this is how I will do it. Now let's see if I can make the computers do it in the same way, right? So now let's say I told you this sentence. I love watching Steve in his keynote on Microsoft Office. So, and if I ask you, can you tell me which person called Steve is mentioned here? You will probably say it's Steve Ballmer. If I say I love watching Steve in the iPhone unveiling, you'll figure out that this sentence is talking about Steve Jobs. If I say I love watching Steve in Office, the show, then you'll figure out that it is the actor Steve Carell who acted in the show called Office, right? Likewise, you'll figure out who is the actor called Steve in this movie Father of the Bride. So notice here that all these sentences they did not mention the exact name of the actor or the CEO of Apple or CEO of Microsoft, right? It just had the first name, Steve, partial name, right? But once I gave you the surrounding context, you were able to figure that out, right? You in your mind, you knew about all these persons. In your mind, have knowledge about Steve Jobs, you had knowledge about Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, have knowledge about these actors called Steve, right? So in your mind, you have all this information. So when I say Steve, in your mind, you think, oh, I know about 10 different Steves. So then when I give you this additional information, let's say iPhone, then in your mind you suddenly go, oh, Steve Jobs is the iPhone Steve, right? That's the key intuition for us, right? We want to utilize these signals and make Watson also utilize these signals to identify which person the user might be interested in, right? And to do that, we utilize the context information. Is context now so if you see in your graph, let's say I've shown a sample subgraph from the larger knowledge graph. I show some of the entities that are connected to Steve Jobs. So you'll see that the entities that are connected to Steve Jobs, they are like Pixar Animations, California, iPhone, Apple Computer. So all these entities are connected to Steve Jobs. So now imagine looking at the graph from a top, a bird's eye, right? And if you focus at Steve Jobs, you see that all the surrounding entities, they give you the context. They give you an idea that, oh, Steve Jobs appear in relationships with all these other entities. Okay. So these other neighborhood entities of Steve Jobs essentially your context information, right? So that's why I've written that neighborhood of the entity is its context. Now you may argue we can go at the second order neighborhood, third order neighborhood. In theory, you can do that, but that is practically computationally very inefficient. And also, as you move farther away from the entity, the signals become weaker. So let's limit ourselves to the direct neighborhood of the input entity. So essentially, what you now need to do is, given an input partial name, find out all the entities in the graph that contain that partial name, right? So you find Steve Jobs, you find Steve Ballmer, you find Steve Austin. These are all the entities. And then you explore the neighborhood of these individual entities. So if the context was iPhone, you find that the neighborhood of Steve Jobs is very much related to iPhone. Neighborhood of Steve Austin is very much related to WWE wrestling. Right? Obviously, if someone is talking about iPhone, you need to go with Steve Jobs and not Steve Austin. Right? So this is the high level approach, high level intuition. Now, how did we do it? Here it is. Let me explain with the help of another example. So let's say the question is, which search algorithm did Larry and Sergey invent? Okay. So if I ask you as computer science people this question, you will figure out that, the answer here is PageRank. Larry and Sergey are the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And again, notice that how did in your mind you will figure this out? Because you know that, there's this context, search algorithm, Larry, Sergey. So you know that, these keywords you have seen very together, always together, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, right? So your mind, you could figure out these connections and answer it. So now how did we do it in the graph, right? Okay. So note that in the knowledge graph in Wikipedia, we had more than 2,600 people with name called with Sergey in their name, and more than 11,000 people with Larry in their name. Okay, so that's how the algorithm works, and let me explain what is happening. So the input to the system is these tokens, Larry and Sergey. Okay, now what you do is, first of all, you get a list of all the entities from the graph that contain Sergey in their name or Larry in their name. Right? So this is the box. You have a list of people named Sergey. You have a list of people named Larry. Now in this middle box, which is in the dots, essentially what you are doing is you are computing a score, which is proportional to the strength of the connection between uh, these pairs of entities, such that one entity is from the list of Sergey, one entity is from the list of Larry. What do I mean by that? Here, again, an example. So let's say there are two persons called Larry Page and Larry Ellison. So Larry Page is the Google co-founder, Larry Ellison is the CEO of Oracle. And we have one entity called Sergey Brin. So in the graph, we will notice that, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they are very strongly connected because we see them multiple times together. And Sergey Brin and Larry Ellison, they also have some connections because they are all related to computer science. They are all located in California, but the connection is a bit weak. At least it is weaker than the connection between Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Okay. So what you do is you do a pairwise similarity comparison, right? And figure out that, out of all the pairs, Sergey Brin and Larry Page is the pair that is maximally strongly connected. They have a very strong connection between these two. Okay? And then, so that is your one source of information. This is the context that you get from graph, right? And then you have another source of information, which is essentially just the text from Wikipedia. So what the text from Wikipedia does is it takes the input question, search which search algorithm did Larry Sergey invent, and effectively the key here is the search algorithm. And what it does, it figures out that in the Wikipedia pages of these persons, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, Larry Ellison, which Wikipedia page has the highest probability of this keyword search algorithm being present, right? So of all the persons called Sergey, all the persons called Larry, obviously Sergey Brin and Larry Page will have the highest probability of containing the keyword search algorithm, right? Because they have worked on. So we call them as entity models, but you compute these scores from the text of the Wikipedia, right? So now you have two sources of information. One is from the text of Wikipedia, and one is from the structure of the graphic. And essentially, both these things, what they're capturing is, given the contextual present in my input, can I come up with a scoring for individual entities, right? You compute these two scores and combine them and produce a ranked list. And this is how the output appears to be. For Sergey, you have a list of different people called Sergey ranked based on their contextual relevance. Likewise for Larry. And the first answer is Sergey Brin and Larry Page, right? So this is a high-level overview of the approach. You can go on my website and find corresponding papers on all the three sections, on the three problems that I'll be discussing on these topics. You can go on my website and find all the papers. The PDFs are there for going into all the mathematical details if you are interested. But I hope that you are able to capture the intuition and the high level idea of how we define the solution. So okay, so before we go next, any questions till this point? Please ask the questions. Since I'm sharing my PowerPoint screen share, if I go to the chat box, the this sharing is stopped. So feel free to unmute and ask the questions if there are any.
Yes, sir, I cannot see any questions in the chat box yet. If the participants have any questions, you can please unmute your mic. Otherwise, we can proceed further.
Okay, so I assume I'm a wonderful teacher and I explained everything perfectly. So I'll proceed to the next section. So till now, what we have done is we have now have a way to find relevant entities in the graph. User specifies a partial input, and based on that input, we go and identify the correct entities that the user might be interested in, right? So if the user says Steve in context of iPhone, we have figured out a way, or we have a way to figure out that, oh, the user is interested in Steve Jobs. This huge graph of more than millions of hundreds and millions of facts and hundreds and millions of entities, we have narrowed down to a specific entity, right? This is our point of, this is our starting point from where we will start exploring. So now, once we have done that, the next step is how do we find more information about the entities, right? So let's see what do we mean by that. So let's say we figured out that the person was looking for Steve Jobs. Then the next question will be, okay, what are some other entities related to Steve Jobs? Right? This might be the follow-up question. About that, I am looking now. Tell me more about Steve Jobs. Okay. So if I ask this simple question, then most people will answer something like this. What are the entities related to Steve Jobs? Well, there is Apple computers. There is this Tim Cook, who is the current CEO of Apple. Someone will say iPhone, someone will say iPad, someone will say MacBook, right? All these typical answers are present. Now, think about it. Information like this will be of interest to them, right? This is something very well known. It is everyone knows this, right? So this is not something they are interested in finding, right? They say, "Arey, this is common knowledge. This is all of us know. Tell me something important, right?" So let's say we ask them, okay, so you are not interested in this, then give us some hint, right? So, okay, so then say, okay, show me persons related to Steve Jobs, but in context of Pixar animations. Now, this is the question if I ask you or any random person. I doubt that most of us will not be able to give very good answers here, right? So, question to all of you. Can you suggest some persons related to Steve Jobs context of Pixar animation? No answer. So I'm assuming that a lot of us don't know much about this, right? And this typically happens. Some of the persons related to Steve Jobs in context of Pixar animations are this Ed Catmull, Elvira Smith, and John Lasseter. Now, who are these three people? So I'm forgetting exactly who, but one of them is a graphics designer. One of them is a executive at Disney Pictures, right? Because Disney owns Pixar Animations, right? These are all the persons that are relevant or connected to Steve Jobs when someone is interested in knowing about Steve Jobs' connections in context of Pixar Animations, right? So now this is very less known information, even in Wikipedia or other sources. this information is not as popular, or as frequent as Steve Jobs information in context of Apple, right? The common. And this is precisely what the security agencies are interested in. Like, tell me something which is not obvious, which is not in the common knowledge, because only then we'll be able to figure out what these terrorists are. Okay. So again, the signal to utilize is this additional context. So now another way to understand this intuition behind using context is in this way. Let's say, let us consider Elon Musk. Okay. So Elon Musk will have thousands of connections in the graph, right? So what this context is doing is, if I say that, tell me about Elon Musk in context of SpaceX or Tesla, essentially the context is saying that instead of searching or exploring or evaluating all the thousands of facts related to Elon Musk, focus your attention only on a small subgraph, only on a small subset of all the information you have about Elon Musk, right? That is all the context is helping you decide that in this graph, I have figured out this entity. About this entity, there are many information present. Which of the information is for that I use context. Context of context as your navigator. It will tell you which graph, explore the graph in this specific direction, right? This is what context is conceptual. Okay, so now let us try to capture this problem in a more mathematical sense that we can solve. This was all the intuition, but now how will we translate that intuition into something which the computers can understand? So let us start with the problem formulation. So this is the setting. We are given a knowledge graph, let's call it G, and we are given an input query entity. So this EQ, the input query entity, it could be the output of the previous state where we have found the correct entity, right? So we found the correct entity, that becomes our. And the user has also provided us some text context, which we called as. We can provide the context in the form of a set of keys. Given the graph, given the input query, and some text context, the task is to return a ranked list of entities from the graph such that those entities are relevant to our input query in context C. This in C is the important part, right? Should give the entities from the graph relevant to Steve Jobs in context of Pixel application. Entities relevant to Steve Jobs in context of Apple, in context of let's say his personal, right? So these are the things, these are the type of queries which show that uh, how context is important to us. Depending on the context, the answer keeps on changing. Okay, so this is our problem setting. As I said, Steve Jobs in context of Pixar, entities will be Michael Eisner, Edwin Catmull, blah 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 blah. Context of Apple, these will become Steve Wozniak, Tim Cook, Donald Wayne, all Apple executives or Apple engineers, right? All these things. This is our problem, and this is our expected outcome. Okay. So how do we do that? Let's have a look. Now, mathematically, essentially what we are doing is we are interested in computing this probability of an entity given Q, and that is given my input entity and context C, what is the probability that entity from the graph is useful, right? So essentially mathematically, this is the probability we are trying to compute. So once you apply Bayes theorem to this probability, it can be simplified or decomposed into this following fashion. So left hand side is probability of, can show, you can actually mathematically derive it to in this format, that this entity is proportional to a product of individual probabilities. First is probability of observing, which we call as entity prior. This means that just entity prior means what is the chance that a random entity from the graph is exactly what the user is looking for without even knowing what the input query is and context. So this is just like a prior. Okay? What is the chance that this individual entity will be used? Now the next question is, the next component is what we call as entity affinity. Affinity
Excuse
is,
me, sir. Can I
yeah,
ask one question?
yes, please.
Sir, what is the role of knowledge graph in explainable AI? Mm,
Can we take this question in the end, just to make sure that we are first deal with the
okay.
topics that are related to it, right? So all these extrapolatory questions we can take at the end, just to
Okay, sir.
maintain the flow of the presentation.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, so where was we? Where were we? Yeah, so we were at this PEQ given E. So PEQ given is essentially saying what is the probability that entity E, which is our input entity, is important for entity, which is called as entity affinity. Essentially, it is saying how strongly connected or how useful the two entities are in each other. And the third part is probability of C, that is, given my target entity, what is the probability that that target entity will generate my context, which is context value, right? So essentially, the task was initially the left hand side, the task was Q and C. This was my input, and I wanted to compute my target entity. We have decomposed into three components for target entity, right? What is the chance that target entity will be important without any information? It is just by chance. Is the chance that that my target entity is related to my query entity, which is entity affinity. And the third component is what is the probability that my target entity is useful for my context C, right? So this is my framework. So actually, we have decomposed the initial task. Simple, easy to understand component. So now the first component, entity priors and entity affinity, can compute them by using the graph-based metrics, right? Because note here that in these two components, we only have entities that are involved. If entities are involved, we can just use graph-based metrics, capture structural similarities of the graph, right? So these could be measures such as graph-based distances or some other state-of-the-art measures, which I'll discuss later. These are all derived from the graph. And the second component, probability of C given, note here that E is the graph component and C is essentially the text component, right? So now to use this, how do we do this, right? Starting from a graph and computing the probability of a set of, right? So for that, we build what we call as entity context models, which now I'll describe. Okay. So uh, in order to compute this component, PC given E, right? What we need is what we call as a context model. A context model essentially gives you a way to represent different contexts which are relevant to an entity. Okay? So how do we do that? Okay, let's first try to understand it intuitively. So let us consider Steve Jobs, Wikipedia page for Steve Jobs. Uh, what we do is from Wikipedia articles, we identify and extract all the passages from complete Wikipedia that talk about Steve Jobs, right? For example, the passages or sentences could be like this. One document found a sentence which says Jobs and Wozniak co-founded Apple in 1976. Well, Wozniak's Apple personal computer. Some document it was mentioned that Apple merged with Next and Jobs became CEO of his former company. Likewise, you find different component, different passages from different articles. For example, third paragraph, 1986, Jobs funded the spin-out of graphics, later renamed Pixar from the computer graphics division. So note here that different passages or different sentences, they capture different context in which Steve Jobs is being mentioned in Wikipedia. For example, in the first we can see that the first two passages are context of Apple. Third and fourth paragraphs, they are in the context of Pixar animations, right? So I extract different passages, different sentences from Wikipedia. They talk about Steve Jobs. Sentences are in a way capturing all the known context in which Steve Jobs has been talked about, discussed about in Wikipedia, right? So what we do is we concatenate all these sentences together into a single document. Now, this single document is essentially what we call as the context document of Steve Jobs. Why? Because this single document captures all the context that Steve Jobs has been described in Wikipedia. Right? So this is something, this is the crucial thing. For all the entities in the graph, create their context document. Okay. Now, once you have the context document, computing contextual relevance becomes relatively easy. So recall that our contextual relevant component is probability of the context given. Now, this uh, probability can be computed by what is known as a unigram language model, right? Assume here that the context terms are independent of each other. That is, the probability of a context term to C consists of multiple terms, right? So we assume that each term appears independently from the other term in the context. This is a standard naive base assumption, the term dependence assumption, which we apply. Then the probability of the whole context being generated by reduces to the product of probability of individual context terms generated by. Okay, so let us now focus on this term in the product terms. What is the probability of generating or observing a single context terms given an entity? So now this can be derived as follows. This is essentially uh, can essentially be computed by using the context document as follows. In this formula, the numerator is term frequency of term context document. How many times context term appears the context document of my entity divided by length of the context document. Basically, if my context document, let's say Steve Jobs context document, contains multiple occurrences of an apple, then obviously the probability of generating apple from the model of my context document will be high. Same intuition that is observed here, I can keep this one, right? As I said, TF the term frequency and the vocabulary. Any questions till now? The formulation clear?
So one participant is asking, can you define CDE?
So CD is the context document of entity. Here, the context document which we defined here. So for Steve Jobs, the document on the right is the context document. Now, stitching all these things together, essentially what we do, given an input entity and a context free pair, we use the context, we find a short list of contextually relevant entities. These entities may or may not lie in the immediate neighborhood. Since it's a short list of contextually relevant entities, we then compute some graph-based information only for this set of target entities. So note that this set of target entities will be few hundred or entities, whereas the graph might contain millions of entities. Note that we have used the context to reduce our search, and then we use the ranked list based on the probability and present it to users. Okay. So now this was the problem and algorithm that we developed. Now let us see. Let me just illustrate how this thing was demonstrated or useful to the security agencies of the government. So remember that their use case was terrorism and criminal activity, these type of things, right? So in our graph, the entity for Osama bin Laden, right, had connections to multiple other entities like Al Qaeda, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Taliban, right, Barack Obama, these type of things it was connected to. Initially, when they had their system, they were, if they try to find some other entities related to Osama bin Laden, they will always get these common entities, right? Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Al Qaeda, right? And they would be like you, they would be like, hey, this is all we know, that Afghanistan is related to Osama bin Laden and Saudi Arabia is related. This is of no use to you, no use to us, right? Then after this context part, uh, that's how their system looked like. So this is a screenshot of the system that was built by us. So we had this thing that, type the name of the entity and type some contextual keyword, and then the system will be able to offer a list of other entities that are very less popular, very infrequent, right? And are probably not known to many people. So, specific example, Osama bin Laden is the entity, the context is Geronimo. Now, you may ask, what is Geronimo? So, Geronimo is the name of the operation where this Osama bin Laden guy was. Okay, so this was the name of the operation. The system takes this input and tries to find entities in the graph that are useful or relevant to this specific context. So note here, the first entity found, Matt Bissonnet, it's a person. Is, anyone knows who Matt Bissonnet? Probably no, right? So Matt Bissonnet was actually the Navy SEAL officer who killed this person, who killed Osama bin Laden, right? This is something very few people know. This is a very less known fact. It's only mentioned in, one or two cases on Wikipedia, right? But because of this context information, the system was able to give this less known fact, less known, a very high weight. It pushed down other entities, let's say Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, which are mentioned multiple times. They are very popular. The system reduced their weight because they were not in this. Just that this entity, which is very few occurrences, very less mentions, but very relevant in the context, the system increased it and showed it at the top. And even the other entities, they are very interesting, very useful. So, for example, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. So this person was actually the messenger of bin Laden, taking his messages from his hideout location and giving it to other terrorist organizations, right? And CIA, they were actually tracking and following movements of al-Kuwaiti to figure out where Osama bin Laden might be hiding. Again, this was the information which was very less, very few mentions, but since it is important in this context, system was able to give it a very high weight and bring it to the top,
Sir, I
right?
want to interrupt you. Actually, we are getting problem with the voice. Many of us. Can you try to speak a bit louder or the microphone near to your mouth?
Okay, sure. Is it better? I'm actually close to the microphone. Is it better? Microphone?
Abhishek, please respond because I couldn't hear the answer.
Okay. Sir, it's breaking a bit. So I don't
Okay,
know, it's
might
a network issue or something.
okay, might the network. Any improvements? I'm actually just very close to the microphone. Any improvements?
So yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Yeah, please do let me know if there is some issues. I'm very close to the microphone, so it probably could be the network also. But in case there is some issue, just let me know. I'll try to uh, be even further louder. Okay. So here, as I was saying, assuming a lot of it was not dropped, that the key intuition here is that by using the context, a lot of important information bubbles up to the top, right? So here also now again note that this is something, this is a demo we built on Wikipedia for the clients. But now imagine the security agencies using this in their own systems, in their own offices, and feeding it with their own intelligence report, right? So tell me more about this specific person in context of this new blast or this new drug case, right? So this is where the utility of the system comes into the picture. The system is able to ingest all the documents, intelligence reports that are coming in, create a graph out of that documents, and whenever a new query comes into the picture, the system is able to identify specific portions of the graph that are very relevant in the context, and they may or may not be popular on their own, but somehow when it comes to the context, they become very important. So even if they are very less known, hidden somewhere, the system is able to find that information and show it to the end user, which is the detectives or other intelligence office. Right? So that's where the whole utility of the system comes into the picture, right? Okay. So any questions till now till we move on to the next application?
Sir, there are certain questions which are not exactly related to this actually. So let us finish this first.
Okay, sure. Okay, so let's go to the final application, which is more about which I call as the aha moment, and to motivate you about that. So the first application is predicting possible links or possible connections between different entities in the graph. So as an example, if you go to the Wikipedia page of Brad Pitt, you will find no mention of John Voight. And if you go to the Wikipedia page of John Voight, you will find no mention of Brad Pitt. Now you may say, okay, but what's the point? So essentially, John Voight is father of Angelina Jolie. Brad Pitt was married to Angelina Jolie, right? So both of these entities, Brad Pitt and John Voight, they are connected by Angelina Jolie, but the Wikipedia pages don't mention each other, but they do have a connection. So this is your typical link prediction problem, right? Relationship is because they are both strongly connected to Angelina Jolie, right? So this is the link prediction problem, figuring out how two entities might be connected to each other. So this is your classical link prediction problem that you can find in many of the papers. But now think again, going to our client's experience. So if you go to Google and search for this terrorist called al-Baghdadi, Google shows you a list of other related persons, Qasim Soleimani, Umar al-Baghdadi, and so other things. So Google is showing you because people also search for these people when they were searching for al-Baghdadi. But from here, somehow you may not be able to figure out, okay, why is this Qasim Soleimani shown here? He looks like an army officer or something, right? So how is he related to this terrorist? So here's the typical use case that we wanted to address. If I tell you any two entities in the graph, can you explain to me how these two entities are connected together, or what are the possible relationships between these two entities? And these two entities might not be directly connected in the graph. There might not be a direct connection like spouse, husband, wife, father, employee, subsidiary. There might not be a direct connection between entities, but somehow there is some indirect connection, which not obvious, but can you find that out for me, right? So that was the motivation. Now, how it will be useful in context of security and terrorism related activities? So let's say there was this unfortunate shooting attack on Charlie Hebdo magazine in Paris, right? So let's say the security agencies want to search, okay, is there a connection? Could there be a connection between this terrorist suspect and this shooting attack? Can we use the graph to find out is there a connection between them, or is there a connection between this drug lord that we are investigating and some other criminal hidden connection? Can we use the graph to find that out? That's the exact case they put forward to us. And now let me tell you how we proceeded for that. Okay, so let's first consider all the possible paths between al-Baghdadi and this magazine Charlie Hebdo. So once we studied this, found that there are n thousands of paths that can connect these two entities, but some of the paths are very high quality. Something like what I have shown at the top, Nasir al-Buhaishi AQAP. So Nasir al-Buhaishi is another terrorist who is associated to, who has some connection with al-Baghdadi, and who is also a part of this organization called AQAP. Now this AQAP was found to be connected with Charlie Hebdo attack, right? So now you could see how all these pieces come together. Al-Baghdadi is connected to this terrorist who is part of AQAP organization, who was related to this Charlie Hebdo a terrorist attack, right? So now you established a chain or a link or a series of evidence between a terrorist attack and a possible terrorism. So this is a high quality path, but not all the paths are like this. Most of the paths are very generic. For example, al-Baghdadi is connected to US, US is connected to Paris, and Paris is connected. This is not a useful path, right? And there are typically, graph what we will find is there will be thousands of such paths. Again, the problem is out of thousands of paths, most of the paths will be useless, provide no interesting information, and only 2, 3, 5, 10, or very small number of paths will actually be of interest. So again here, the challenge is how can we identify these small subset of paths, differentiate this from other thousands of other paths which provide no useful or no relevant information, right? How do we do that? So that was the main problem. Now, how do we do that? Let me again explain with the help of intuitive examples. So consider these two paths. First, consider the path at the top. So here, okay. So the path at top. So keep these two paths in mind. The first path is Nasir Buhaishi, AQAP, connected to Charlie Hebdo, and second is US Paris, Charlie Hebdo, right? So notice that the top path is very less popular, very specific. These two entities at the extreme, and the bottom path consists of entities which are very general, US and Paris, right? So every person who is a US citizen, any organization located in US, they will all be connected to US. Likewise for Paris. entities will have a lot of other connections. But AQAP, Nasir al-Buhaishi, these are persons who are not known to be connected to a lot of other persons. They are very specific to just a few entities in the graph. So this intuition we call as specificity of entities. And essentially how we measure specificity is it's very similar to inverse document frequency, right? Like IDF is log of one log. So just like IDF is, inverse of your document frequency. Basically, it's a log of 1 divided by number of documents a term appears in. We say that specificity of entity is also similar to the IDF of the entity. That is, how many other entities a given entity is connected to. So if a given entity is connected to many other entities, we say it's a general entity. When entity is connected to very few other entities, we say it's a very specific entity. So what will happen is that if we use such a measure, the popular entities like US, Barack Obama, all these things, they will get lower scores because they consist of very generic entities. And then entities which are very less popular, they will get a very high score. But there is a negative con associated with this. What happens is that in a practical graph, there is bound to be noise and errors, right? So if there are certain noisy entities which are also very less popular, they will also get a very high score. So this is again a very standard issue with IDF-based measures. So we need some other measures to, account for this. So let's see what we do there. So then we look for some second source of intuition. So the intuition is that, if we say that a path between entities is a good path, is a strong path, then that means that a strong path should consist of strong subpaths. So we say that a path between al-Baghdadi and Charlie Hebdo is strong if individual subpaths, al-Baghdadi to al-Buhaishi to AQAP, and AQAP to Charlie Hebdo are also individually strong. Right? So it's a greedy algorithm, right? A strong path consists of individually strong subpaths, right? So that's the intuition. So how do we capture that? For that, we used the connectivity. What is connectivity? So we use this distributional vectors and read it over text box. Think of it as something like, just like you have word2vec or glove vectors for word embeddings. Think of similar vectors for the knowledge graph. So you could use standard vectors like, let's say, node2vec or deep walk, other knowledge graph embeddings. So then, if in a path, let's say in this subpath, the embeddings for these two vectors, they are very similar, then we say it's a strong subpath. Likewise, Nasir, Buhaishi, and AQAP, their embeddings indicate that this is a strong path. Likewise, AQAP and Charlie Hebdo, their embeddings indicate that these are related and strongly connected. You sum the scores and find the connectivity score of the path. It's essentially saying that a stronger path consists of strong individual subpaths. Okay. Now here you will notice there is one limitation. Since it's a greedy algorithm, it is only looking at the immediate entities and not the whole path, right? What do I mean by that? So it may happen that al-Baghdadi is strongly connected to Nasir, but he may or may not be connected to AQ. That is also possible. So to account for that, we introduce this notion of cohesivity. What do we mean? We say that individual subpaths need to be strong, but at the same time, we also enforce that the long range connections are also have some similarity or some connections. Again, you use the embeddings for this purpose. So not only you use embeddings to compute similarities between al-Baghdadi and Nasir Buhaishi, you also use embeddings to compute similarities between al-Baghdadi and AQAP. Likewise, compute embeddings for Charlie Hebdo and you compute embeddings for Charlie Hebdo and Nasir Buhaishi, right? So in this fashion, you are computing scores for paths such that the individual components of the paths are cohesive, they are strongly connected, and at the same time, they are very specific input entities. You are computing these three scores, combine these three scores, and come up with a relevance or utility score for individual paths in the graph. So you compute this for all the paths that connect these two entities, rank them by their utility score, and present the top paths to the end user. Right? That's the whole intuitive idea. Okay. So actually, for all the on my website, as I said, you can go and have a look at the corresponding papers for these approaches. The papers describe a bit more detail and some other mathematical details if you are interested. I've only covered the intuitions and actual intuitions which are utilized to solve the problems. The mathematical models can be different depending on what you prefer. As long as you are able to understand and capture the intuitions correctly, the techniques don't matter that much. As long as the techniques are suitable for capturing your intuition, you can experiment with a variety of techniques, but it's the intuition that matters. And for other details, you can always refer to the papers. So let's see, once we implemented that method, what were we able to achieve. So remember, I initially showed that this example, right? If you search for al-Baghdadi on Google, you'll find a list of other persons that people have searched for. And then you may have this question, oh, who is this guy, Qasim Soleimani? Very different. He doesn't look like the other terrorists. So how is it that Google is suggesting? So we use that and we prepared a set of important paths. And this is the top ranked path that was found, which explains how al-Baghdadi is connected to Qasim Soleimani. So we found that the path consists of these entities, Abu Muhammad al-Julani and Bashar al-Assad. So then we went back and checked, okay, what does this mean? So it essentially, if you read the paragraph that offers this explanation, shortly after the Syrian uprising began against the administration headed by Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, al-Julani moved into Syrian territory and fully supported by al-Baghdadi. Bashar was supported by Major General Qasim. So that's the connection. Abu Muhammad al-Jalani was leading the fight for ISIS in Syria, right? Syria's president is Bashar al-Assad, and al-Assad military general is Qasim Soleimani, who was leading the war against al-Julani, right? So this is how the system is able to find how these two entities might be related. Qasim Soleimani is the military general of Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad, who is the Syrian president or Syrian leader, is fighting a war with ISIS. Al-Julani is the ISIS leader in that war, and al-Baghdadi was the head of ISIS, right? So now with this path, the connection becomes very apparent, very clear. Now imagine this ability used by security agencies, right? They have seemingly unconnected inputs coming in. That, you know, you are investigating this case about person X, person Y might be important, or person Y has been observed in this specific situation. So if you could use this graph created out of their intelligence reports and uncover these connections, like, you know, Y met with Z, Z met with A, B, C, and all these long range connections could establish a trail and connection, establishing or explaining how these two seemingly unconnected entities are related. Right? This is what was very interesting and very appealing to the student. And this is where the power of representing knowledge as a graph becomes very apparent. Because instead of facts just stored separately, by organizing the facts in a graphical structure, you are establishing long range connections, right? Now it's up to you. How can you utilize or uncover these long-range connections, build useful applications, or solve useful problems, right? That is what the knowledge graph technology is enabling you to do. There might be other ways of doing this and achieving the same objective, but knowledge graphs is one popular way of doing this type of analysis. Okay. Here's another example out of the terrorism domain, which I actually just tried. So I just queried the graph to see, how is Amir Khan connected to Christopher Nolan. So again, in this case, there will be hundreds of other paths, like Amir Khan is connected to India, India is connected to US, and Christopher Nolan is connected to US, and many other movie actors in between, many other film producers, Oscar ceremonies in between that connecting them. But those things are not very useful. What was useful is the top path that we found. So the top path was Amir Khan acted in a movie called Ghazni. Ghazni was copied from Memento, and Memento was originally directed by Christopher Nolan. So this is a very interesting path, useful path that explains how these movie actors in two different countries are connected. I mean, if I give any two movie actors, there will be a number of paths, right? There are movie actors, they'll share many common friends, many common movie producers, actors, all these things, right? These are very general, may not be very informative. What is unique and informative is that actor one acted in a movie which was inspired from work by some other movie actor, right? Like in this case. This is very appealing, and it was a validation of the algorithm as well, that it is actually able to find something useful. And in this example, I did this just because I knew this fact and I wanted to see, can we uncover this fact, right? And to my excitement, we were actually able to do this. There were many other experiments we just did just for cross-checking, because obviously we did not have access to the intelligence to win data. So build the system internally, tested it for something we knew, and then gave it to them and received their feedback, and based on that did the follow. Okay, so that's all the applications I wanted to cover. The key takeaway from my talk should be that knowledge graphs is just a very good, very useful way of organizing and providing structure to the unstructured data that you may have. In addition to the traditional ways of doing inferencing or Sparkle engines that are typically associated with knowledge graphs, I wanted to give you a different flavor of their applications, how we used it in IBM Watson for doing some really innovative stuff. At least I think it was useful. And the uh, motivation or the key exciting thing was that essentially we could use it to find what we call as needle in the haystack uh, information. Things that are there, it's just that they are buried deep down the huge load of information that you may have. And to summarize, what actually it feels is, so there's this famous quote by this Purdue University professor, that this discovery, more like going in a workshop or a warehouse, where you have small parts of watches, like small screws, small gears, small components, which individually are not as valuable. But somehow, when a talented craftsman combines watch components together and creates a Rolex watch, which is very, very valuable, right? So it's the individual pieces that are buried down in different documents, different tables, and all that stuff. Individually, the information might not be useful, but somehow when you connect that, right, connect these dots, amazingly, very interesting insights and useful information appears to come up, and that is what is the whole notion about using this knowledge discovery from knowledge graphs, right? That's the whole aim of the whole knowledge graph effort at Watson, which I was part of. And I hope I could give you some non-traditional way of thinking about the problem and using knowledge graphs in this application, which is generally not captured in typical papers or books I would say. So that's all. I'm open to questions and feedback now. I'll also move to the chat box so I can see the questions.
So regarding path map and the algorithm that you are explaining, can you share please the research paper on that? Is it possible?
Sure, if you go to my sure. So if you go to my website, just search my name on Google, you'll find my website and you'll find all the papers there. All the PDFs are there.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions?
Sir, can you please, can I ask that question now? So
Yeah,
what is
sure,
the
please go ahead.
role of knowledge graph in explainable AI?
So again, it's a, I mean, there is no concrete answer. As I said, it depends how you want to use it. So for example, in the example that I just showed of path-based, so that is one way of explaining entity recommendations, which let's say the Google was showing that, Qasim Soleimani might be related to al-Baghdadi. So we use graphs to explain that, right? That's the connection. So again, there is no fixed answer here. It depends what your problem is, what you mean by explanation, what type of explanations you are looking for, and how you use graphs for that, right? In theory, knowledge graphs is just another interesting tool that you could use to build or offer explanations.
So is this the disadvantage of knowledge graph that there is no explanation in knowledge graph? So if we will consolidate into AI, then we need that thing explainable AI. That is the role actually of knowledge graph.
No, I don't think it's a disadvantage, right? Explainable AI essentially aims to offer explanations for why the AI systems took a decision, right?
Yes.
So if you think about it, any AI system will have this disadvantage. I don't like SVM has a disadvantage, knife base has a disadvantage. Ultimately, it depends what you mean by explanations. Explanations are free of multiple ways. So offering explanations so that the users can understand it. Are you offering explanations so that the model developers can understand it, right? So there are different ways of looking at it. So there is no fixed definition or fixed way of saying that this is an explanation or this is not an explanation. Ultimately, it depends on your use case. For example, in our use case, the explanations were going to be how are these two entities connected via this indirect paths, right? For us, that becomes an explanation, and we prepared a method to find that out. Depending on your applications and your utility, figure out that this is what I mean by explanation. This is the criteria for me for seeing that whether an explanation is good or bad. And then based on that, I'll define my objectives and my methods to find, explanations for the task I'm doing.
Sir, what are the popular tools for developing this knowledge graphs, sir?
So I think a lot of companies, they have their own individual proprietary toolkits, but you can try OpenAI toolkits such as Stanford's Open Information Extraction Toolkit, Stanford's Core NLP. So if you go to the chat box previous session, I shared links for the Core NLP websites. From there, you can find toolkits and libraries that can do this information extraction and create entities and relationships and give it to you, which you can do to create your graph.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Bhatia, excuse me. Is there any demo type example that you can show in core.nlp? Like the link you have given, I tried it. It just extract the class like the subject, object, and predicate. I mean, person, title, country. If I am giving any sentence like Obama was the president of USA, but I mean, I want to see how to connect these entities with the relation. Is there any a little example that you can explain with any link or that link that you have given the chat box? This one.
So the link was the demo for the website, right? But if you go to the code repository, they'll have a lot of Java doc available. So they'll have a lot of use sample code and test cases, which you can use, right? So essentially the demo shows that given an input sentence, how you can extract these entities and relationships, right? So this is the
Okay.
demo. So, right? So once now, this is essentially all you need, right? Pass it a
Okay.
text, give me the list of entities and relationships, right? Now, if you
Yeah.
want to look at the exact code, go to the code repository. They'll have Java doc, Java test cases, and sample code.
Can you share the link
yeah.
of the code repository, please?
I shared that code nlp.rin, right? So if you just use that link and other just Google Stanford code NLP and it should take you to the links, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, what should be the metrics for measuring the quality of a knowledge graph?
So again, it depends on the task, right? First thing is you want the graph to be error free and as little errors, as little noise as possible. So one metric could be how many entities that were there in your input documents, how many entities you could capture in your graph, right? That could be one metric. We could measure it using precision recall. Take a small set of documents, annotate manually, and then create the graph and see how many entities you are able to uncover, and how many errors the system. That could be one way of measuring the quality of the graph.
Okay, one more question, sir. When we are doing graph embedding for representation of graph into vectors, how it is differing from the word embedding schemes? How much is difference is there?
So word embeddings basically they take the context in the word, right? If you and the same principle is applied in embeddings for knowledge graph entities. So essentially, there are different papers. For example, the want to try with Node to Vec. That was one of the first papers to do that. What it does it, just like in word embedding, you take into account context windows of surrounding words. Node to Vec takes into account surrounding nodes and paths and connections to create embeddings. We want to read into Node to Vec paper, and then the follow-up works on knowledge-based embeddings, which are papers such as Trans, which considers relations and other additional constraints of the graph. But the key idea is that we want to respect word embeddings. You are taking the context. Different methods define different context in graphs. The context could be the neighborhood, context could be 5 entities nearest to me, all those type of things. So define your context in that way, define an objective function, and then train the embedding.
Okay, sir. Sir, if we have to remove some nodes from the knowledge graph after some time, let's say it is going to be outdated after some time, then how this could be implemented in knowledge graph?
I mean, it depends. If you just like you perform a delete operation on databases, you have a similar option to do that in your graph. Just remove those nodes and their associated edges, right?
Okay, sir. Actually, I was reading about the dynamic knowledge graphs, so I was unable to find much work in this direction. That's why I'm asking this question.
Sure. Yeah. So again, there's not a fixed answer, right? It depends a lot on your use case and applications, right? So if you feel something is incorrect, you can just remove that information from the graph, right? For example, let's say the graph contains President of the United States is Barack Obama, but after the elections it changed. So you will remove that graph, remove that fact or update that fact, right? With the new information.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I can see a query in the chat box that are there any preliminary mathematical skills required to do research in this area?
Wanting to research on KG. So I would say for any research, if you really want to do research, then skills are not an impediment. You should just spend time on figuring out the problems. And if the problem interests you, then whatever skills that are required, then you will acquire that. Given and assuming you are actually interested in that topic, right? Skills are never a deal breaker or blocker in doing research. Because if you figure out that, oh, I'm interested in this problem, to solve this, I need to learn this language, you'll figure that out, right? I didn't have any knowledge about knowledge graphs when I started working with them. It's just that we wanted to do, so we picked up skills while working on the problem. Sparkle and all that stuff was very new to me, right? So if you are really interested, then skills are not important. If you see most of the talk, there was not very heavy mathematics, at least not beyond class 10th or class 11th mathematics, right? If you really want to do research, then skills will not be a bottleneck. It should not be a bottleneck. You should be willing to solve the problem. Once you are interested in solving the problem, whatever skills is required, you will pick that up if you are interested. That is not going to stop you. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sumit. Are there any internship opportunities at your place?
I mean, there are always these internship opportunities. The best place will be to look at the IBM jobs site. Right now, especially due to COVID, we have not yet started the program. So hopefully, beginning of next year, there might be some openings. I'm hoping this COVID situation will improve. But you can always look at the student and career page of the IBM website. So if there are typically for summer internships, according to the Indian academic calendar, beginning of year, we do put out openings there.
Okay, that is regarding the official internships and I think the paid internships you're talking about. But if there are something like just joining unpaid means, then is it possible somehow without waiting for those announcements?
Sure, that is possible. And I think the best way to do that will be reach out to people in IBM Research in India. Most of them you can find on either the website or from LinkedIn or from your connection. We do have a program called Global Remote Mentoring, where students can start working on a project with a mentor. They do get a certificate for that. It's an unpaid internship, but you have to reach out to the mentor to see that, you know, I'm interested in these topics, and I saw that you also working on these topics. So is there a project I can help you with? And in case they have some bandwidth or they have some free idea that they want to explore, they can start working on that GRM thing with you. You can always reach out to people and see, you know, if there is a GRM based opportunity.
Yeah, true. So specifically speaking, actually, do you have some open project right now in which you may be looking for 1 or 2 students?
Not at the moment, because we are coming at the end of the year. So I have my hands full, but we can talk about it, let's say, beginning of next year, because then we'll be, you know, starting a new project for the year and doing the planning. So right now it's just finishing what we have done, we have planned for the year. The end of the year is coming. So at least for next 3-4 months, my hands are fully tied. But beginning of next year would be a good time to, you know, start discussions.
Yeah, that is perfect. So I don't know whether there are some more queries, but I can see the thank you messages in the chat. Yeah, no specific queries regarding the topic are there. So participants, I think you might be satisfied with the queries you have posed and the session that has been delivered. If you have any queries still left, you may ask for next 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll be closing the session. Thanks, Dr. Sumit. Thanks for being with us. And we are really fortunate enough to have you. Dr. Maya will be taking the next session. She'll be continuing with knowledge graphs itself. So we'll be happy if you can also join us. Otherwise, yes, we can understand that the time is always short with you people. Thanks for joining, sir.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Really happy to share the work. And you can always Google me, it will take you to my personal website, and you can have all my papers are available there. I also had delivered a few tutorials on knowledge graphs in some conferences. So the slides are also on my website. So you can have that. All my papers are also there. And in case you still have some questions, my email and my Twitter information is also on my website. So you can use that information to reach out to me if there are any questions or anything you'd like to discuss. I'm always open.
Yeah, this information was for all the participants.
Yeah,
So-
everyone, please feel free to check out my website. I have a lot of knowledge graph tutorials and papers there, which you can download. All the PDFs are there.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the nice session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So a small announcement for the participants that we'll join back at 3 o'clock, and all of you know the evening session link. We will also circulate it again at 2:30 on the WhatsApp and the email. So thank you and bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.